Okay, we're going to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of February 29th to order. The first item on the agenda is, first of all, we'll do the approval of the agenda. Seconder? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is the Special Committee of the Whole Budget minutes of February the 15th. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is a presentation from BC Assessment Authority, Mr. Jerry Maloa.
Good afternoon, Worship and Council. Thank you for having us back. It's about a year ago that we were here. Mr. Danicotti sends his apologies that he can't be here with you tonight. He's out of town, so I'll have to do it. So let's see how this works. Okay, so BC Assessments, a Crown Corporation, our service mandate is to be open, transparent, fair, accurate, timely, accessible, knowledgeable, respectful, innovative, and collaborative. So hopefully you'll see some of those collaborations with us over the course of our works with you. BC Assessment was established in 1974 in response to a need for fair and independent valuation throughout the province. We're a Crown Corporation. We're established under the Assessment Authority Act, and we're governed by the Assessment Act. Our board of directors and CEO are all appointed by Cabinet. And currently our minister is the Honorable Peter Fassbender, Minister for Community, Sports, Cultural Development. So what's an assessment role? An assessment role is our main product. It lists all the properties within a jurisdiction. It provides you with a stable, predictable assessment or predictable base to base your taxation on. This year, the assessment roll has roughly 1.99 million properties. It equates to roughly $1.34 trillion. An assessment roll, and that's an example of one that we had in our office. Used to be handwritten, and it identifies ownership, it identifies property values, it identifies the legal parcel, it identifies exemptions, it identifies improvement values and land values. It forms the basis in BC of roughly $7 billion annually in revenue for municipalities and taxing jurisdictions. So high level, 2016 assessment roll resulted, we saw an increase in our total number of folios by roughly 1.6%, roughly 20,000 folios provincially. Provincially, we saw an increase of roughly 11.1%, which is fairly significant. We added roughly $20.3 billion in new construction provincially. I'll work my way down to Colwood as we go through it, so you'll be able to see the difference. There's 9 property classes within the province, and as you know, you set your tax rates based on those 9 property classes. Colwood primarily is comprised of residential, commercial, and civic recreational, and you've got a smattering of other property classes, but those are the 3 most significant classes of property within your taxing jurisdiction. In Colwood, you've got 5,815 folios. That's an increase of 30 folios over last year. You've seen an increase in your market by 4.47, 4.505%. Your total roll value is $3.5 billion. And last year we added just under $90 million in new construction, primarily made up in the residential class. This is significantly higher than in previous years. You'll see later on in slides how much more significant than previous years.
Explain that a little more, because what I don't understand, if you go back to that slide, is you've said that we have 30 more properties this year than last year, but we increased our total non-market by 90 million or 80 million, which suggests that each of those 30 was close to. So maybe you could explain that.
So you're making the assumption that each new house is all that goes into new construction or non-market change, and that's not necessarily the case. What happened last year was you have new construction or new builds, you have zonings that change, you have ongoing assessment work that happens on an annual basis. And last year we undertook an initiative in most of Greater Victoria in a project that we call desktop review. So we're using oblique imagery, street front imagery to reassess a lot of properties. So the majority of what you're seeing in that 90 million is a function of desktop review. So your assessment role is comprised of, as I said, excuse me, I can't see this, $3.3 billion. The bulk of it is in residential. I think you're at about $2.5 billion in residential. You're around 600 million in Class 6 and about 60 million in Class 8, which is the rec nonprofit, and then the smatterings around there. Correct me if I'm wrong, because my slide's up there as well. So this slide shows folio growth over the last 11 years in Colwood. And you can see from the slide it's been a very gradual increase, roughly about 100 folios per year over the last 11 years. And that goes back to Councilman Martin's question about non-market change. Obviously, they're not all worth $1 million property. Next slide shows you what's happened to your roll since 2012. Back in 2012, your roll was at $3.4 billion. It's declined over the years, and this year you're seeing it ticked up. So it's now back up to 3.35. A lot of that is market movement. A lot of that is the new construction. It's an ongoing, it's an ever-evolving process. Within that roll growth, your residential, as I said, is about 2.5 billion, and again, it's followed the same course as your total growth, peaking or dropping from 2012 through 2015, and then in 2016 we're seeing it increase. Holds true for Class 6 as well. Your Class 6 properties are it's less of a dramatic decline, from about 740 million to just 680, something like that. That shows up on your non-market change or on your roll report 2 slides back. This Class 6 is, sorry for the jargon. Class 6 is business and other, and if you look back on your slides on page 6, you'll see that Class 6 is referred to as business and other, and for assessment purposes, it's anything that's not specifically held for industrial, residential, or one of the other 8 property classes. Basically, it's our catch-all for everything else. This graph shows your non-market change residentially. You can see that back in 2012, your residential non-market change was 24 million. It ticked up to 46. It then dropped back down to 24 in 2014. And then in 2016, it's up to 81 million, which is a direct function of DTR. This shows your overall non-market change for all property types within Colwood. And generally speaking, you were tracking at about $35 million annually, somewhere between 30 and 35 million. Last year we had a $56 million lift, and again this year it's the $90 million lift. But typically you track around 35 million. So, those are the general highlights of the role. You're up in Class 6, you're up in Class 1. You've seen positive non-market change. There are risks to the role. Right now, we've entered in our period of review panel period. There's 56 public appeals for folios located in Colwood, which is roughly less than 1% of your total folio count. There is $57 million under appeal, or 1.7% of your total roll value. This is down from last year where we were at 104 million at risk. And the breakdown this year is 30.7 million in Class 1 and the balance in Class 6. And your Class 6 carries a much higher tax rate, which Andrea can explain to you.
Just ask a question which council might be wondering. If you could just touch on the effect of the ONI results on what was... Are you getting to that? Yeah, okay, that's important. Thanks.
This is a graph that just shows where the appeals are coming. So out of the 56 total appeals, it's broken down by neighborhood. I don't know if you can see it in your graph very well. But the bulk of the appeals are coming out of South Colwood, 26 folios. Generally speaking, 56 folios is not a very significant amount from my perspective. This is the number of appeals that are under appeal that are residential in nature. So you have 45 appeals that are residential. The balance are non-residential. And again, the bulk of your residential appeals are in South Colwood, as we defined it for assessment purposes. So risk to roll. 2014, 2015, you've had a large appeal on the Colwood Center lands, or now as they're known, the ONI property. My understanding is a recommendation came to council a few weeks back, and I'm not privy to the council or to the recommendation, but I suspect it's been approved by council to resolve the appeals as indicated by Suk Manhasser of Young Anderson. So generally speaking, back in 2014, the risk to the roll was about $25 million. The risk to the roll in 2015 was $12 million. We've resolved, or tentatively resolved, the appeals. They haven't been signed. They haven't been processed by the board yet. For 2014, 2015, for 2014, I believe the settlement was $24.5 million, and I'm not certain as to the splits between residential and non-residential. Yes, 19.5 million for 2015. For 2016, there has been no appeal to the Bioni on the Colwood lands. The assessor is making a recommendation to correct some errors that the assessor has on that folio, on those folios, which will impact your Class 6 NMC by roughly $10 million. We double counted some land values. This is a report that we run that shows roll stability. So generally speaking, our rolls have been in an aggregate we've lost less than a third of 1% over the last 5 years. Information on how to get information about us, what we do, how we do it. You can find us on bcassessment.ca. And if you're looking for more information regarding property assessment, there's the government website, homeowner grants and deferment programs, so on. And finally, our contact information. Ruben Danicotti is still the assessor for Vancouver Island. Bill Dawson is the deputy assessor for Nanaimo, Central Vancouver Island. Chris White is the deputy assessor for the North Island. I'm one of two deputies in Southern Vancouver Island, and Cynthia Wright is the newest member of our management team. Questions?
Thank you very much.
I have one, with respect, I have one final
Okay, go
question.
ahead.
So one of the things that council's always very concerned about is the revised roll. So we've got the completed roll, because the revised roll is what we will be using to determine our tax rates. And I believe that comes out, is it about the third week of March?
It will be completed. So we have the completed roll, which went out on
Yeah.
December 31st.
Yeah.
We're now in our inquiry and review period, and the revised roll gets published. We have a statutory obligation to complete our review panels by March 15th. The revised roll comes out end of March, beginning of April.
Okay. And I believe that that revised roll then will reflect those changes flowing from the ONI appeal.
You're There's two things that
Yeah.
will happen. There is the 2014 appeal, and there's the 2015 appeal. On the 2014 appeal, you will get a supplementary assessment.
Yes, yeah,
For 2014,
Yeah.
2015,
Yeah.
which will reflect the values of
Yeah.
those decisions.
yeah.
The 2016 revised roll will reflect any changes that are made by the review panels,
Yeah.
by the assessor, relative to errors and omissions
Okay.
on the completed roll.
Okay, because you had mentioned some errors of about 12 million, so that will
10.
be 10 million, that will be reflected? Okay. So I think that's important for council to understand that, because it has been a very long and complex process. So the change that is made to the 2014 and 15 rolls, we will do separate calculations, and that will trigger actual refunds of taxes that have been paid for 14 and 15. And of course, my interest in asking this question is to make sure we get the most accurate information available, because I have not done detailed tax calculations yet, because this year is quite an unusual year. So we really are relying on the revised roll this year.
So just once the revised roll is completed, what we will do is there's a period of time between the delivery of the revised roll and what we call the appeal deadline. Well, the appeal deadline for the appeal board is April 30th. So once we received all the appeals from the board, we'll start putting together a list of the appeals. We'll review the folios based on our information through PARC. We'll provide your manager of finance an estimate of risk to roll associated with those appeals as well. And as we work our way through those appeals, that risk to roll estimate is adjusted as we get more information or as issues become more clarified.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any committee members have questions? Rob?
If you go back to the non-market change all classes slide, which is on page 7 of our PowerPoint.
What page is that?
Page 7 of the PowerPoint.
Thank you.
So basically, we were at 35, roughly between 32 and 35 million per year increase. 2015, we jumped up to 56 million. Excuse me. Does that include the adjusted expectations of Omni, or
No.
is that it does not? Okay.
No.
And so that will also affect the 2014 number as well, correct? Because
Yes.
that'll drop down too. And then the 90 million, I'm assuming the majority of that is going to be Royal Bay. Is that?
A portion of that is Royal Bay, but as I said, we've done an awful lot of work on DTR, and we're picking up somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000 a folio
Okay.
relative to DTR. There is risk associated with that. Generally speaking, I took a quick look about 10 minutes before leaving. Right now, the risk excluding Class 6 or the non-residential is about $3.5 million. So it's actually not a significant number in Class 1, from my perspective. But there is risk there as well.
I need the mic. If I'm looking at page 9, which is the 2016 risk to roll, you basically your third tab basically says that the total loss in 2015 was 10.15 million. Is that 10.51 million shown on the non-market change all classes, or has that
What
not
slide
been
were you
reflected?
referring to, please?
Sorry, 2016 risk to roll, which is on page 9.
Page 15.
Well, mine's page 9, but
Oh, slide 17. Okay, sorry.
sorry. So the third tab over, or the third box, says 30.78 non-residential, 26 residential. This is what I'm looking at.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
That's a breakdown of the allocation between what's at risk right now, the 57.1 versus. So the 57.1 is the total. The
Right, and then
30.78 is the non-residential portion. The 26 is, sorry, the 26.38 is the non-residential portion, not
Okay.
residential.
Right. But under that, it says total loss in 2015 was 10.15 million.
Mm-hmm.
So is that 10.15 million identified in the non-market change all classes for 2015? So, like, for example, 2015, a non-market changes all classes with 56 million. So what I'm asking is the 10 million we lost in addition to the 56, or is the 56 and then it's minus the 10?
The 10, it's, no, the 56 is the 2016 estimate of
Okay.
what's under appeal. The 10.6 is what was actually lost last year. So
That should be total loss in 2015, which would be reflected in 2014? Is that
no,
what you're suggesting?
2015 is reflected in 2015.
Okay.
2014 is, for our purposes, the roll comes out December 31st, so it's reflective of January 1st, but we're picking up new construction from December 1st through to October 31st. So the calendar years are not the same.
Okay. But, so if I'm looking at the slide on slide 14, which is the non-market change all classes, for 2015 was 56 million. It does not reflect the Omni thing.
No.
But does it reflect the 10.15 million that was lost in the 2016 risk to roll? Or 2015?
It would, 2015 is, the 10.15 would be reflected on the 2015 roll.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is an overview of the 2016 and 2020 budget summary. If committee could just hold their questions until sections 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4, Finance Department would really appreciate that.
Thank you. So staff are just going to be bringing up the budget summary, which is the next document we're going to be looking at this evening. This is intended to be a high-level review because I know last year when we went through this, a person sitting there in your shoes often wonders, well, how is this going to impact the bottom line if we approve all of these special projects or if we approve all of these asset additions? So what I've tried to do is to give you a bit of a you want the budget summary? Give you a bit of a high-level review. Now, we had Mr. Marola here this evening because I wanted to tell you that I haven't done detailed property tax rate calculations yet. You can see we're looking for a bit more information there. But what I have done on this summary, you'll see that there's some values put in there for taxation. And I have basically applied the amount of tax we collected last year and added the same percentage to it that council approved in the 5-year financial plan last year. So last year, we did have a few obstacles to overcome, and we did put in a 4.95% tax lift. That's an actual increase. And we approved 3.9% for this year and 3.5% for the next year, et cetera. So I've basically just taken last year's revenues and applied 3.9 for now. That does not mean the tax lift will be 3.9. The good news is the tax lift would be less than that because we do have some non-market change, which is why I did have Jerry walk you through that, because that's very important to note is we have got some new construction that adds to our tax base, and that's a very good thing. So I just wanted you to see roughly what the tax revenues would look like. I'm pleased to report that our PILT revenues, as we've discussed in some previous meetings, are up, and we expect them to stay up. So if the tax increases, say 4%, the PILT increases is about 4% as well. So we have our total taxation. The next section is to do with government grants. And I took a few minutes before the meeting this evening to go through this with Councillor Martin because this is a bit complicated. If we apply for government grants and we receive them and complete the project, you will see the revenue reflected here. So that's specific government grants. Now, we also get something called gas tax revenue. That is a conditional government grant. That revenue is only recorded when we complete the project that's funded by gas tax. And when we get to the special projects section, I'll just remind you, we did go through this at our last budget meeting, is we had planned to do projects in excess of 800,000. We spent just over 200, and a lot of those projects were planned on being funded by gas tax. But because they weren't completed, you'll see that the revenue is under budget because we didn't do those, okay? So some of those numbers you see there going forward are fairly high because there are some fairly ambitious numbers that we're going to be reviewing this evening in terms of what staff are hoping to complete for special projects and asset purchases. So our total financial services revenue then, the budget for 2015 was 17.2 million. We're looking at an actual of 16.5. That's under budget mainly because we didn't do all of the projects we had planned on. And our forecasts going forward are a little bit uneven depending on what projects we're planning on doing. Our tax revenues are very stable and going up at a rate that we can project. The next section is some of the service fees that we collect. And as we get into some of the departments, such as the building revenues and the planning department, even some engineering fees, we are seeing our revenues going up there as we see some fees coming in, user fees, permit fees, and other things we charge, such as road and sewer DCCs. And this year we're actually going to be budgeting for that because there are some significant monies that are coming in the form of community amenity charges and affordable housing. We haven't always budgeted for that, but this year we're looking at just looking at my paperwork here, you'll see something called developer contributions is the line I'm looking for. Developer contributions. The actual last year was $183,000. We're budgeting $370 for 2016 because we've already collected half of that amount. That is to do with Royal Bay, Phase 1A and Phase 1B. And there's some other things. I actually, for those of you who want more detail, your eyes may be glazing over soon, so I don't want to bury you here, but we do have some really nice forecasts that our chief building inspector has put together, and it lists all the various developments that we have happening and the different fees and revenues that flow from that. I thought it was actually quite positive because so often at budget we're always talking about we got to cut this and that, and expenditure control is very important, but it is nice to see some revenue gains to help pay for some of those costs. So I just wanted to draw some special attention to that, and I also want to thank staff because putting this budget together is not just me, it's everyone here and some other folks behind the scenes. It's a lot of work, and thank you for your contributions this evening. So that gets us to the total revenue line. And we do see some increases. Now, when we budget revenue, it's usually easier to forecast for the immediate year because we know what's on the books, we know what's coming in the door. And Flo and I excel at being conservative, I would say, because we looked at his forecasts and we cut them back quite a bit. But we knew we already had some money in the door and for sure other things this year. But when we go further out, the crystal ball gets a little bit hazier, so we're very conservative on those revenue projections, so that's why the revenue will not be as high because we don't know for sure. The next section is operating expenses core, and I'd like to defer detailed discussion on that until we get to each department's individual workbooks, because that is your time to have a look at the details and ask questions. There is some reason why, if we look at the bottom of total recurring expenses core, there's a 4% lift there. And sometimes, again, that's just like in revenue, we can foresee more accurately our expenses for the near term, for the current year. And we do have a couple of specific workload issues we're hoping to address in 2016, which we will talk about when we get to the workbooks. But there's good reason for that 4%. And going forward, the increases are relatively modest, just to draw your attention to that. Over the page. The next section is on special projects, and we will be going into that in detail here shortly. This is just a high-level review so you can see how everything ties together here, because it's an awful lot of numbers, and I'm trying to get this whole budget exercise on 2 pages, which is a bit of a workout, so that you can see at a glance what we're dealing with. So we have talked at length in previous meetings about special projects, what we've spent, what we haven't spent, and then you'll see some numbers there going forward. When we get into the special projects this evening, there's a few departments that do drive most of this workload, and we are able to have Shar here this evening bring up the workbooks, and we can actually click in there, and there is quite a bit of detail that our managers have put together for you. Again, I didn't want to bury you under paper, but there's a lot of support that we can also bring up for your reference. The next section called additions. The biggest thing happening in the current year is the central sewer, Colwood Central Sewer, the borrowing of $2.4 million. You'll see that coming in as an addition, so that funding comes in, and then it goes out down below to help pay for the actual building of that sewer trunk line and pumping station. And if I stumble on these sewer topics, Michael, you're going to help me out. So that's sort of the main section there. We are watching our debt carefully. We're also putting some money, we're taking money from reserves, and you'll see almost immediately below, we have a plan to put money back into reserves, and that's very important. We have debt payments. I'm under deductions now. We have to pay our debt back. So when we borrow money, whether it's for a new fire truck, we have to plan to pay that back. Other things like the debt for the central sewer, we pay that back via a parcel tax, and that is paid for specifically by those properties in the area that will be benefiting from the new sewer line. So that's a little bit different. So the section below that is basically capital asset purchases, and we're hoping to get to that this evening as well. And you'll see it's listed by department. The major areas generally are engineering and public works and sewer departments are the three areas, unless we're buying a new fire truck, and then it gets kind of expensive as well. But you can see where the need is driven here. Now the good news is I didn't try to do anything to the bottom line. I've reported the figures as they rolled in. This is raw data. And without any effort to try and come up with a balanced budget or work on tax rates, we're sitting with actually a very small deficit of $255,000 right now. And I'm actually quite pleased with that. It, you know, doesn't take a lot to trim a little bit. Again, I haven't come up with a real detailed tax lift yet, but you know, it's looking pretty good actually without a whole lot of work. And going forward, we've got some very ambitious capital projects, which we probably can't afford to do them all. So that's going to help bring those later years into balance, because there just simply isn't going to be enough money in the reserves to do it all. And that's where you come in as a council to help us with some of those decisions. So that is that item. I'll just pause. You may have some questions.
Are there any questions from committee members? Cynthia?
Thanks. Just going back to, you were describing the reserves and some transfers from reserves, as well as a plan for putting money back in the reserves, and I just didn't quite follow you there.
Okay,
I think it was just on that second page there.
Yeah, so there's two lines of data. One is where we have a plan to put money into our reserves, specifically our fleet reserves in particular. And that line, I'm just trying to see where I can, they're not numbered here unless you can see it on the screen.
Other reserve contribution?
Yeah, there is under additions, see that big heading, additions?
Yeah.
And it's in bold, it's transfer from reserves. That's where we're pulling money down from reserves to pay for things. Okay. And then the next line is just about 2 lines below that under deductions. There's transfer to reserves.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
And I'm pleased to see we're doing gradually. We can't turn the train around really quickly, but we are doing a much better job of starting to restock our reserves. And it doesn't happen overnight, because we can't do it quickly, otherwise it's a huge tax lift.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Any further questions? There being none, do you want to carry on?
Okay, thank you. So next item on the agenda then is the overview of the 2016 to 2020 special projects. So these are items that are not normally done in our core budget, but they may not necessarily be major asset purchases either. They tend to be one-offs. So we're going to start with a listing that you have of special projects. Now, when I came in and had a look at these sheets last evening, I decided that they could be tidied up a little bit. I didn't see the level of description on some items pulling through. So with your permission, I'm going to be giving you some new printouts of both the project lists and the capital asset lists. And along with that, you'll be getting a priority listing, which the engineering department has put together so that we have some help. And the new list you're going to get, there's going to be some numbers beside each item, and that's the priority that engineering has put on them. We've done this just for the engineering department because they do get the big spender award here, so we do ask them to prioritize that. Thank you, Michael. So if I could just, do you think you were making, could you could you help me out here? Yeah, everybody gets one of those per, but before you go, one of these is projects and one of these. Okay. This is projects. Yeah. So Megan is handing out the capital assets. That replaces tab 4 in your binder. Per is handing out projects. That replaces tab 3. Okay, so you should all have received 3 pieces of paper. One is a small piece listing priorities, one is the big one of projects, and another big sheet of capital assets. And they are to replace what's in your binders in tab 3 and 4. Sorry about that, but I do think this is going to give you some better information and give you a bit more direction on some of these things. Okay, so if everybody's ready, we're going to just start with the overall summary of projects. And I'm just going to walk you through it. We have gone through these now for a couple years, so it may be getting a little bit more familiar. So the plan is, over the next 5 years, there's a big highlighted green cell that says we're planning on spending $2.1 million and change on your big sheet. Everybody with me? And the totals that we're planning on spending each year are also right at the top. So 2016, we're looking at $673,000, 2017, $405,000, and so on, just to make sure we're all literally on the same page. And then when we look at the content of this, basically the projects are coming in by department. And so the first, just one other thing, when a project has more than one funding source, it will show up on here twice. It doesn't mean we're doing it twice, it's just that that's what it does, it's pulling it in. So the first project you're looking at is an example of that. So one project is to do with our archives, and the next one is actually a family picnic. One of them is being funded by a reserve for future expenditures and one from taxes. And that's why it's in there. In this case, it actually is 2 separate things, but sometimes you'll see it in there twice, like the artifact storage. This is important for you to know as a council, because if we have already taxed for this last year and the project didn't get done, we take that and at year end we make a special entry and we put that money that's been taxed for into what's called a reserve for future expenditures. Then we pull it back out in the next year and we apply those funds to pay for it. Because there were a number of things, there's some, often there's a very good reason why we can't get everything done. And so we need to make sure that we're keeping clear scorecards on our special projects and capital assets. Now we can't do that for the hundreds of thousands of accounts in the operating account. I'm often asked that, if somebody underspent account, they say, can I please carry it forward? And I say, well, if we can carry forward where you're over as well. It's just impossible to keep up with that level of detail. But we do that scorekeeping for special projects and asset purchases. So with the first item, we did obviously raise some money in prior years. You'll see a funding amount of $7,500. The other one is a new item, which is a family picnic, 7,500. And the artifact storage, again, in previous years, we had already raised that money for $10,000. There's a little bit more money there that we hadn't raised. That would be funded from taxation. So the First Nations outreach, I'm going to explain it, and then Pat, if you want to add any color commentary, if there's questions, if that's okay. So.
The CAO, or sorry, the outreach program, I believe, is the CAO's
Mm-hmm.
budget there.
Yeah. So that one, Ian, we discussed that, and it is something that doesn't happen every single year, but we do put $5,000 in the budget for it. We keep that money and we pull it back out of the reserve to pay for it when we actually hold the event. And if you have any other comments.
And through the chair, I understand that there's been an effort to resolve a long-standing issue down at Esquimalt Lagoon, and as our Director of Finance said, we budget $5,000 a year, which we haven't been spending. That's been going into the reserve for future expenditures. I'm hopeful that we can try and resolve this issue this year with that $15,000. If we don't, it will go back into the reserve for future expenditures, and this line item will show up again in 2016. Typically, we don't do these events of this magnitude every year, so I think we projected that we'd do another one in 5 years, just as a best guess. So you'll see it now, and you'll see it in 2020.
Okay, Pat, did you have anything to add? Otherwise, we'll just carry on here. These are, or if council has any questions, these are relatively small amounts. We can get to the big ticket groceries here shortly if you like. Okay, so moving on. We have a number of events, and Sandra, I'm sorry we ran out of real estate here at the table this evening, so you might want to nudge somebody out of the way if you need a mic to answer some questions, if there are some, on the communications topics. So. So if you want to go ahead, I know you can speak to your projects much more eloquently than I can.
Thank you. So under events, there is the waterfront event, which we spoke about at the last council meeting, which we've allocated $10,000 toward in the budget, the same budget that we had last year. In addition to that, included in here is a project, a community engagement project to engage the community in defining Colwood. So sort of place branding, sort of economic development profile, just bringing people into what is Colwood today, what are those characteristics, what do we want Colwood to be, and moving forward with that. So that's another 10,000. And then also in here would be events like the Christmas Light Up, events we might hope to host at the new pergolas, and events we would hope to host at the hotel market space. So that's what's included in that line item.
Any questions from the committee? Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
Clarify what we're doing. Are we, like, I wasn't planning on asking questions now because it was my understanding we were going to sort of go in depth as we move forward. Like, should I be asking questions now, or should I be waiting until we actually get to the specific?
No, this is a good time. This is our detailed review of the special projects, Councillor Martin. So yeah.
So is there a specific page then that I'm referring to when I look at, like, I've had Sandra tell me that
Yes.
these are the projects.
So if you would like more information, what we're going to do right now is we're going to go into Sandra's workbook and we're going to pull up that information.
Okay. Which is which section? Do we know?
Yeah, if you could.
Oh, it's not printed
No.
yet. Oh,
No, we
I see.
didn't.
Oh, okay. Got it.
It would be thousands of pages, honestly, so we're
no, that's-
trying to,
that's fine.
yeah. So if you, yeah, and if you could go to her special projects.
I'm not sure there's a lot of extra detail in there, actually. other than an outline.
So this
Do you
does,
thi- excuse
this
me,
does,
Andre? Do you think that we could have the screen brought forward just a bit?
sure. So now you can, oh, you can see there, okay, okay. Is the leash long enough? So what you can see there is some details, like some breakdown on each of the events. So the first one is a waterfront event. It looks like it's going to be something that happens every year. Events in the Herm Williams Park, pergolas. Looks like a one-time only thing so far at the hotel, at the market. Christmas light up is popular every year. And open houses for $10,000 is a one-time event from what I can see for 2016.
So, through the chair, two questions to Sandra. Sandra, can you tell me, the Christmas light up at 2,500, is that, does that actually include any capital? Like, are we actually buying lights at all anymore? Like, are we placing that, or is that just the cost of running it?
This amount is for the cost of running it. Public Works also has a little bit of budget to do the
To replace and to actually hopefully grow it?
That's
Are
right.
they, okay. And sorry, could you explain again what the open house was?
The open house is a project to, it's the Defining Colwood project, and I
Oh,
don't have
right,
a better name for it yet. I will.
And what do you anticipate, I'm sorry, and what do you anticipate that $10,000 to be spent on? Like, is that just prepping for it, or is that?
No, some of that will likely be consulting fees to get either a marketing company to help us with some of that, or a public participation consultant.
Through the chair, I just, this has been talked about at our Economic Development Committee. It's funding actually coming out of what would have otherwise been the Economic Development Department this year.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? No? Okay, thank you, Sandra.
Okay, so moving our attention then to special projects in the fire department. And we have two of them on the list, an alarm panel and siding, and I'm sure Chief Carey, you can speak to that as required.
Thank you. The alarm panel is one piece of the fire department that was not replaced when we underwent renovations and seismic upgrading in 2005, 2006, because we felt we could get more time out of that panel. That has proven to be successful, although this last year we've been getting ghost alarms. And when we bring the techs in, they can't locate these ghost alarms. I've also been told that this panel is now getting hard to find parts, and so they suggest that we should look into replacing this. So this is the fire alarm panel. None of the sensors in the station have to be replaced. It all works with all the sensors that are already there. This is just for the actual addressable panel. Any questions on the alarm?
8,000 sounds like a lot for an alarm panel. Like, is that? I mean, is that what the going rate is? Like, geez, or are you buying like a platinum gold one or something?
No, I wish. No, that's the going rate. I actually have, I believe, this one from Chubb Edwards, and this is actually a volunteer firefighter, works for Chubb, and he certainly got the best quote that I could receive for it. So that worked out quite well. And it's nice to be able to talk to him on a one-on-one basis because he also does it for a living. But it was not his company that we originally had come in to tell us what the issues were and to try and troubleshoot it. It was another company. Then we had his company come in and they came up with the same conclusions. So we got an extra 10, 12 years out of it, so it wasn't too bad.
Any further questions? Carol?
Like, is that just an ordinary, normal, like, entrance panel, or is this an interconnected? So, yeah, so I'm thinking,
This-
like, if we
This monitors
described what it
everything.
looked like, it would be more,
Yeah, many, many different heads within
Yeah.
the station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
good.
Any further questions? Thank you, Carrie.
Did you want to go into 2018, or did you want to bypass that?
Second project there that you might want to just, that was the siding?
And this one has been moved forward because each year we take a look at the building and try and determine what kind of maintenance is going to be required. So we've kept pushing this one along, and we certainly feel we can get to 2018. And in 2018, we may actually move it to 2019 or 2020, depending on the condition, whether it will just need some more stain or whether those boards will actually have to be replaced. So that is for the museum and the siding on the fire station, and that would be a one-time project. But again, we feel it's 2018. It may continue to go further down. We've already moved it. So.
Any questions? No? No. Gord?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just jumping back maybe to the communications part, because I just wasn't sure where it would land in the budget. But in terms of if we needed additional or wanted additional Christmas decorations downtown, or banners, that sort of thing, because of added infrastructure, where would it land in here?
Well, you know, when we went through these budgets at a staff level, we found 3 other budgets. You're covered on this one.
Thank you.
Okay, Andrew, do you want to carry on?
Sure. So we're going to turn our attention now to Flo's area of expertise, which is the couple projects here. So Flo, if you would like to speak up on the building inspection project. Replacement study, I guess, is the first one, sorry.
Madam Chair. In our special projects, I have put an allowance in for City Hall replacement study in 2017 for $50,000. And this is primarily a study to examine what we're going to do with the City Hall property and City Hall itself. There may be a potential to repurpose this property and realize some profit and allow us to move to another location. This is all driven by the recent, pardon me, I'm sorry. This is driven by the seismic study that we undertook in 2015, and it found that portions of our City Hall are woefully inadequate in if we should have a seismic event. There were 2 proposed options to remediate the building from a seismic point of view. One was in 2015 dollars was for $605,000 before taxes, and the other one was for $1,070,000. The $600,000 option, most of the work is internal to the building, so to do this work would cause severe disruption of systems and occupants and functions and just be chaotic at times. The one for over $1 million, the majority of the work occurs on the exterior of the building around the perimeter. However, it is a sizable amount of money, and I feel that council needs to have a grasp of these numbers to make a good decision in their planning as we move forward.
Are any questions from committee? Gord?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Flo, will we be receiving a copy of that report so we can best come up with a determination in terms
I'm
of
sorry,
direction?
I thought it had already been circulated to council, and I will
haven't
check
seen it.
into
I don't-
that. I will make
I
it
don't recall
available.
seeing it, but doesn't mean I didn't see it. I just don't recall seeing it.
If it hasn't been, I do apologize.
Any further questions? No. Thanks, Flo.
Okay. Next on my list is just for some reconfiguration of office walls in the building inspection area. And this is driven by the overall reconfiguration of office space to make room for more FTEs. And what this $8,000 represents is removing the current wall in the office that Emmett and I share and moving it, sliding it over to create workspaces for 3 people, and thus freeing up more space where the Barb and Ron North are currently located.
Any questions from the committee? No. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll turn the next topic over to Per Christensen, who has, I know, put a lot of effort into putting together the budget on special projects on the IT hardware. Per?
Recording this? Check, check, it's on? Is it on? Okay. So the budget we have in there for the IT, that's not on, is it? How's that? It's supposed to be on. Should be on. Okay, so the IT budget, now that we're totally distracted from the topic of the conversation, we need to regularly upgrade and replace all the workstations and the printers and the monitors. So if you look at what we did in 2015, we hadn't done any upgrades for quite a while. We spent just over $50,000 on upgrades. And so what we've done is identified for the next 5 years what needs to be upgraded and replaced. So we started with 20,000 that we need for 2016, then moving forward to 25,000 for each subsequent year. That will replace all of the PCs, the monitors, and also the large printers that we have in the back. So this is a total plan, and we mapped it all out for the next 8 years to make sure we have sufficient funds.
Any questions? Jason?
Do you see this as an ongoing project? Like we'll be renewing our computer facilities every 5 years or so?
We will be replacing some every year. So this is an ongoing project. And so as we add more workstations every year, so new staff are added, we'll be adding more, and so they'll have some impact on that every year.
Yeah, that's just what I wanted to know, is that we're doing it on an ongoing basis rather than in one big lump sum in 5 years.
Yeah.
We get hit with the $150,000 bill.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, the plan was to do the upgrades, and also we're sort of rolling them down. So the computers, people who need the high-end computers will get new ones sort of not every 5 years, but every 3 years. Ones who need just sort of a standard power, we'll actually end up rolling those down. So we're sort of cascading them down to make sure we get the best possible utilization on all of the computers.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have handed out a list with engineering on it. Now, the prioritization that was done by the engineering department includes projects and capital assets. And not everything has a number. Where we had a number, we have added it to the document in front of you this evening. So the next item on your list is wrapping a hydro box with special wrap. Those are those decals that kind of look like pictures. And that's a non-recurring item. And that seems to have the winning number of 28 on it. And I'm just giving you a bit of a flavor for how these are put together, because Michael, I'd like you to kind of take over this portion, if you could speak to engineering projects. And everyone has a copy of your list about why the priorities were what they were. So I will hand this portion over to you, please.
Okay, if anybody doesn't know where this hydro box is or what it looks like, there's a link to a picture there that we could maybe click on and actually see the picture of the hydro kiosk. When the DCFC was added, they put in a much bigger kiosk than used to be there. It's mostly full of air, and that's what gave us the idea of maybe, that should be a wrap. Yeah, I was thinking of a picture of council on one side and a map on the other to help with wayfinding. That's the other side of it. Where am I? I've lost that project now. Next one is risk mitigation. So that's been an ongoing program that we had a bit of trouble getting started with, but we're well into it now. And this year would include Havenwood Stairs, using money from last year, because we ordered the materials to do the safety railing on Havenwood Stairs, and it didn't come till January. It was very, very late compared to the promised delivery date. And then the other portion of the money in 2016 would be spent on the vertical drop from Havenwood Park into the backyards of some of the places at Latoria. I've forgotten the name, the development there with Red Barn. And so that's the first year, and as we go on, it's a lot of stair railings to begin with, and then there are other issues that come up later. In the next item, which is bridges, again we have...
Excuse me, Michael, just pause for a minute. With respect, Madam Chair, we have a question here.
Cynthia?
Sorry to be a pest. Just on the fence for the drop-off area, that was a major concern of mine when that development was approved. And I'm just wondering why the homeowners are not responsible for managing the risk. It's on their property.
I don't know exactly how that occurred, but part of the development did build a fence, and this is all managed by the approving officer, and an older part didn't have a fence.
Okay.
And so I don't know exactly why that part got missed. I should point out that on the priority sheet, you can see risk mitigation is priority number 3, and we give the reason there: public safety, legal liability, and injury risk. And so anything where there's risk to life and limb or injury risk is well up in the priorities, obviously, and then comes legal liability. So the next item is bridges.
One more question
Oh.
from
Sorry,
Councillor Martin.
Michael, could you tell us, when you say 10,000 or 11,000, is that including labor? Like, are you throwing in labor costs there, or is that Public Works doing that, and it's just materials, or what is that price that we're looking at?
That's I believe 7,000 is materials, and the rest is labor.
Okay, so
And
for
it's
example,
Public
the
Works.
11.5, we've already spent 7, but so would that be an additional 7, or is that 11.5 including the 7?
We've already spent 7 in a sense, but it hasn't. It's still in this year because
Right,
that
so it's
bills
11.5 total.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Want to carry on?
So the bridges is a number of hand railings, required repair or additions on 6 pedestrian bridges and 4 large culverts. But the bulk of that expenditure is the structural work on the Lagoon Bridge. And if you may remember, last year we had expected an expensive year of repairs, but found considerably less rot than anticipated when we opened it up, and got away with spending the money just out of regular maintenance instead of having to dip into this special fund. Again, we've allowed for sort of worst case scenario in order to make sure that we've got enough budget. We don't know till we go in there and start doing the work what we're actually going to find.
Excuse me, Michael, did you miss Lookout Brook Dam? We're just trying to keep up with you here. So we were on...
I did miss Lookout Brook Dam. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, I'll go back to Lookout Brook Dam if we're done with the bridges. And the Lookout Brook Dam, yeah, so responding to the studies that have been done so far that show the potential risk to downstream users of that dam, we have put in the budget for a study of the downstream consequences to better define that, because if we can more exactly define that and bring the dam down 1 in consequence rating, it has a big effect on what size of storm we have to allow for under the rules, the provincial rules. With its current downstream consequence rating given by the dam inspector, we have to allow for a storm which our engineers say probably is going to happen once every 160,000 years, I think he said. It's really an incredible event that we have to allow for. And if we can get that downstream consequence lowered, it will bring down other costs to do with the dam. A small amount of the money there is for a survey of the spillway, because we have been advised by the engineers reviewing the dam to remove the limitation that was on the spillway flow. The spillway can now take a lot more flow, and this raises the potential of a flood downstream in an extreme event. None of the events this winter tested that at all. Really, they were minor compared to what we're being forced to design for. But before any of that money is spent, we will bring a report forward just looking at other options that might be available other than accepting the risk that's in the dam as it is. So people have thrown up options of making improvements to the dam itself rather than accepting the state of the dam as it is. And we'll be looking for instructions from council on how to spend this year's money if they want to go a different route in examining other possibilities.
Questions? Jason?
Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing that report. One of the options I would like to see considered is abandoning the dam altogether. It serves no city purpose other than providing a quaint little swimming hole for perhaps a very small part of the community, and if it's costing us $30,000 a year to maintain, inspect, and so forth, and this has been going on for decades, it might be a good option to consider is just getting rid of it or reducing its height by a considerable amount.
That's one of the many options we'll discuss that have been put to us by other people.
Rob?
I've always had a problem with this budgeting wise, and I'm a little confused. So I'll look towards a whole bunch of staff to sort of help me. So, like if I look at core under public works and parks, I've got $2.3 million and $500,000 that I pay. The city pays for me. The city pays for staffing. But then when we look at special projects, we're including cost of our labor to do those projects. And so what happens is, I understand that if there's a special project that staff can't do what their normal core work is, but it also means they didn't get all their core work done. So I feel as though I'm paying twice somehow, because I'm paying to get this special project done. The core work didn't occur, but I'm still paying the core. Do you sort of understand where I'm going with this? And so what happens is I get confused when I'm looking at these numbers and there's a labor cost component in it, because I almost feel as though I understand there's a labor cost component to everything we do, but I'm paying for that through core. So that's where these numbers get kind of skewed for me. So I would love for somebody to sort of help me along there, explain how that all works out.
And I don't have a definitive answer there, because at this point we are wanting to refine some of those accounting processes. What I can tell you is the majority of what you're going to be looking at this evening between special projects and capital is not done by internal staff in terms of wage costs. When we do up our budget, though, for labor, we basically establish what is the total cost, the number of FTEs and benefits. We know what that number is. And then we allocate it as best as the Public Works foreman can, and as Michael can, to the various areas that they're going to be working on. Because I'm always concerned as well that we're not double counting some of those labor costs. Okay?
And
Any further questions?
I think we might be able to do a bit of work on that still before the budget's finalized then.
Yeah, because if, as you say, there's labor in there twice, we could definitely save some money there. Yeah.
Any further questions? No? Okay.
The rainwater management master plan is basically, that started out, originally it was going to be a complete water plan for the community, but it's been, last year it was narrowed down to just Triangle Mountain, which is most of the community, but just that part. And it's basically about making sure that we have a plan if Pattison Pit develops and we can no longer store our water there. We have no legal right to store the water there, and it is municipal water coming from municipal storm sewers. But in looking, as we went through the budget process, we looked at the amount of other commitments in this year and pushed that off to 2017 in order to make sure it happens when budgeted. That doesn't stop us preparing the documents for the new RFP on this in 2016, because that's all done with staff in-house. But the actual outside work wouldn't be done until 2017 if the amount of time to do these other projects plays out the way we expect it to. That small annual budget there for Transportation Master Plan is updates to the master plan, and these usually come about because of some large development that affects the spread of traffic. Although the Transportation Master Plan tries to take all that into account, we can't be perfectly prescient about how things are going to develop and where on a road they might enter off a large site. An example of how funds like that would be useful is what happened this year, where the public were demanding a left turn from a chosen road onto Latoria Boulevard. The developer said that that was not their responsibility because of older traffic studies, basically. And so we had a transportation engineer look at the updated figures, updated counts, and were able to prove to the developer's satisfaction that it was indeed their responsibility, that the work they had done had caused the need for a left turn to emerge. And so they took on that work. Coastline erosion. So, as you know, we did the study of the risk to the pump station last year, and all that remains to be done this year is the final bit of public consultation with the neighbors, and then the report will come back to council looking at what options there are for dealing with the pump station, what those costs are, and what the public has said, what the interest groups have said, etc., for council to make the decision of what to do. But it's quite clear that if you look at the link to the Instagram on this budget, and I think probably most of you have seen that Instagram of the wave coming over the existing protection, and actually bringing logs with it, that this pump station is at risk in the type of storm that we had this winter. And we've put $50,000 in there for waterproofing the pump station, basically, to allow it to survive a somewhat bigger event than happened this winter, without there being any electrical short or any damage to the pump station. And the only problem then would come if there's a problem mechanically, you know, say in a storm that size, the power went out and the generator didn't do its automatic start. We had to go down there and get it going. If the area around the pump station isn't protected from these waves and logs, then you simply can't send men in there to do the work. I should say people in there to do the work, because it would be too dangerous. And so then the question arises, do we erect a berm to protect the pump station, or do we decide to move the pump station? That will be the subject to the report. But the money that's in there right now is enough to erect the berm. Not enough to build a new pump station, but we'll cover off what action you would take if you did decide to do that in the report.
Cynthia?
Sorry, I'm a bit slow here, but I was just looking at, I'm on my tab 10 for the engineering department and following along. And I don't know if maybe we have updated numbers that I've missed here, but for the coastline erosion study, there's two 2015 columns, one in blue and then one in black. And that just suddenly occurred to me. I thought that was moving to the next year.
Two 2015 columns?
There are. The first one says 24,368 for the coastline erosion study, and the second column for 2015 says 75,000. I'm at tab 10, page 2 of 2.
I think that was 75,000 budget, and the 24,000 is actual.
The one that I can't see? Oh, that one. Tab 3.
For Councillor Day's reference, those are the actual figures in blue in the workbook. So we're just looking at 2016 and forward on these big sheets.
Okay, on the big sheets, and with, not this one. It's a different set of papers. You might have put it in your tab. Maybe it's up there. Maybe. Too many papers.
Heritage at the top.
Yeah.
So then come down halfway where coastline.
Okay.
Reference up here.
So then, all that you're forecasting to spend in 2016 is 15,000?
No, actually, I neglected to mention that the much larger expenditure of about $300,000 was moved to the sewer account. because it's a sewer asset. So when we get to the sewer budget, you'll see it in there.
Gord?
So actually, I think, Michael, you might have just answered it, because I was going to ask you about the source of funds, gas tax versus sewer reserve funds to pay for that work.
Well, the reason you're allowed to use gas tax is that they introduced a new category, which is disaster mitigation,
Yeah.
I believe they call it. And if that pump station went down, that would be definitely be a marine disaster.
But would that still not be covered under the sewer, any sewer reserve, if it's protecting that particular asset, and if that asset goes down? And
You referring to
provides
the
the risk?
15 grand?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a question for the treasurer.
Yeah. I just ask, I'm just sensitive about, we're kind of eroding away our gas tax
So,
funds, which concern me a bit.
so you were suggesting rather than gas tax, it be funded from what?
Sewers
reserve,
are asking
okay.
why it wouldn't be if it
Okay.
was related to the sewer.
Yeah, so there's two different things going on here. This is the erosion study, which is under projects, and when we get to the capital assets, there's an item in there under sewer for the, I think it's the reinforcement and the protection of the sewer pump station down on the lagoon there. And that, I'll have to check the source of funds. And that's sewer capital. So that, yeah, that is where we took the money from. Good point, Councillor Logan. We have actually planned on taking it from the sewer reserve, the actual cost of protecting the pump station.
Right,
This
but
study,
that
though,
was-
is something that does fall within the realm of gas tax.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
So the next one is, well, I'll just say that the ongoing money in this budget is for looking at the effective erosion on our other assets along the coastline. The bridge inspection budget, that's our 5 yearly inspections of Lagoon Bridge in one case, and the multiple number of minor bridges we have. And as you can see, none of those are due until 2018. Carbon offsets, that's a budget that we've been accumulating as a result of our commitment to be carbon neutral by a certain date, and I can't remember what the date was now. After that date, we were supposed to buy carbon offsets with the carbon cost of our emissions, and Council took the decision not to buy carbon offsets, but to use that money to reduce our energy consumption. And this year, the budget is going to be used for replacing our oldest so-called China hat LED lights with new bulbs, and in some cases new fixtures, but mostly new bulbs. And we'll get at least 148 done. We know that within that budget. That contract has already been set up. And we can probably get the rest of those really old ones done, which is only about a dozen, but we know that they're more expensive to do. We expect the payback on that's about 5.5 years. I just calculated that today for Councillor Martin. And we also know that the carbon offsets in the future will actually be declining rather than increasing, as I've shown them, unless there's an increase in the price of carbon we're supposed to allow. But in any case, they'll still be used for money-saving, energy-reducing projects. Subdivision development bylaw should see the very first section for replacing existing sections coming to you within the next 2 months, and further sections will go out, at least go out this year for public consultation, but quite a few of them will in fact be renewed. And that money is simply for getting new drawings done to add to some of these sections. If we don't have the in-house capacity, which is not likely, but the actual revised wording is done in-house. It's not very efficient to have it done by a consultant. Traffic count, that's the actual counting that then feeds into the transportation plan updates that we talked about earlier. And we brought down the cost of that with, by purchasing some automatic counters, and we'll consider extending that if that works out well. Those were purchased last year. The special projects around the pergolas are assigned for Herm Williams Park. Picnic tables, lights, and a portable washroom. I don't know if the communications manager wants to add anything to that. Okay.
Go ahead, Rob.
Thanks. So sorry, portable washroom, is that like a fixed thing? Or is it just going to be there just in the summer months, or what? Just because I'm thinking about our survey, and our survey said one of our weakest things was bathrooms. So, is it just a porta potty? Is that what we're talking about, or are we actually talking about a physical structure that we're going to build there? Or
We're talking about a porta potty, is my understanding.
it's just okay. It'll be permanent. Okay. Oh. Okay. All right. Thank you. I was curious.
The new DCC bylaw is the next thing, and that is a consultant to get that done, and that should, well, that's required because we've actually built most of the projects that were in the old bylaw, and we need to get a new crop of projects in there before we finish the last of the ones in the bylaw. That general operating fund engineering special is the age-friendly report. That is finishing off the work of doing that report, and that needs to get to committee in March because the report has to be adopted by council by the end of March, or we lose the grant. But right now we have the grant, and we're simply trying to spend it all. It's 100% grant. The engineering office furniture is for Nora and Pat. I think it's probably fair to say that engineering has the oldest office furniture in the building. I don't know if anybody else wants to claim that, but I believe we have. And it's I've said they can't replace mine until I retire, but Nora and Pat need new desks.
And I guess I'll look towards more staff, CAO, but it can be through you too, through the chair. I remember this used to be a Trevor function. Trevor Davies, like our public safety guy or whatever he was. And is it still go through one specific person to make sure it meets all the needs, or are departments just going out and buying their own furniture whenever they need it?
Pat?
Through the chair, there's two different things when it comes to the office furniture. There are some departments, as the engineer is saying, their furniture is, it's been here longer than I have. I came in the early 90s. But the furniture that used to be purchased through the Occupational Health and Safety Advisor was more related to people who are having issues with ergonomics. So whether it was sit-stand or problems with their arms or their shoulders or their backs, we often had to buy special desks or special chairs or different things like that. So we have a small budget that sits with the Occupational Health and Safety Advisor or under the Health and Safety budget. It's about $6,000, I believe. But what the other departments do when they identify areas in their department that really does require a makeover is that's more than just your couple $100. Then we're bringing those items before council, talking about those bigger purchases, because you'll see a huge change in chunks of the office as those things are being purchased.
Pat, so for example, engineering goes out and buys these tables, are they clearing that through our public safety person first, so that they're not buying a desk and then it's not ergonomically correct, and then we're buying a second desk, that type of thing? Is there any coordination?
Any of the purchases that we've bought or the furniture we've bought so far, Linda Bryant is currently our Occupational Health and Safety Advisor, and she gets involved. She also gets involved after it arrives to make sure that it's set up properly. So she checks out the height of your chair, where your keyboard sits, all those different features for everybody.
Any further questions?
So the next one is the water fountain on the Colwood waterfront, and that's a regular fountain, a doggy fountain, a water bottle filling fountain, and a child fountain, all in one unit, which will bolt to the wall of the washroom. The next item is actually in parks, so we're well into parks now. Engineered wood chips in 3 parks. These are 3 parks we have where there's playground equipment and there's pea gravel underneath, and that is frowned upon these days. Doesn't meet CSA. Engineered wood chips does, and so we try to stay not too far away from CSA as it evolves for safety. It helps in liability cases. And that's the end of my bit.
Thank you, Michael. Any further questions? No?
Okay, so we'll turn the floor over to Ian on behalf of the Planning Department.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have first up our land use bylaw update, and council may recall this is an item that's been on the books as something we wanted to get to the last few years, and it's really been a matter of assigning capacity away from development planning activities towards some of these much needed long-range planning activities. So the $145,000 figure for this project create space not only for an update of the land use bylaw, but potentially a review of our official community plan, which I understand may come out of the ongoing strategic planning work that council is doing. So that's a bit of a moving target right now, but as council knows, both of those bylaws are quite closely linked. But there's enough money there we're proposing from gas tax to potentially look at one or both there. Next up is we have the urban forest strategy. We've always talked about coordinating with engineering their rainwater management planning work. Given that we're seeing a surge in development activity, we're looking to pushing that off to 2018. We do think it's an important project, but just given the pressures right now, it's I don't think realistic to put it any sooner than that. Social plan is a similar item. $40,000 is once again a plan that we've tried to get to in years previous, but we're looking at that as a sort of a long-term planning project in 2020. We've also got a summer co-op student. We've had that also proposed before. We're talking about leaving that to 2017. really looking at that as a good opportunity to get new ideas and some fresh blood in the office, and to also identify future talent for positions as they come up. I think that's it for me.
Are there any questions? Cynthia?
I just had a question on the land use bylaw review. There was two numbers there. There was $25,000 and $120,000 on the screen. It was split out, and I was just wondering what the split was for.
Madam Chair, that split, it was a late addition and a note for staff to consider potentially if council directs staff to take on a fishery plan review in 2016. We're looking at that being a pretty substantial project that would involve a lot of consulting money, so we're putting potentially up to $120,000 towards that review of the OCP. $25,000 would be money that we could put towards a land use bylaw review light. Essentially, we would be, if council told us the priority is the OCP, we have some money to look at some of the things we desperately need to do with the land use bylaw also in 2016. And I see that $25,000 probably the lion's share going towards a legal review of some of the issues we're having with the land use bylaw.
Okay, I guess I'm confused, because if it was an OCP review, it should be called an OCP review, not a land use bylaw review. So I just think that we have to name our poison here and decide which of those things we're going to do. I realize there's needs and reasons for the OCP review. There's also a lot of reasons for doing the land use bylaws, so I'm just not very comfortable with the numbers being loosely named and affiliated. There's no name beside the 25,000.
Andrea?
Through the chair, I just wanted to clarify this a bit better. There was always a budget. Part of this is the limitations to our system. There was always a budget for the land use bylaw review, and it has, as you can see, an account number assigned to it. Like a lot of the projects we've reviewed today, there's quite often multiple items within that account number, essentially. And in this particular case, we added the official community plan to the same account number because we have some limitations in our system in how many account numbers we can issue for projects. It's actually two projects under that budget. One is the official community plan review, and one is the land use bylaw. In retrospect, we should probably have changed the description to planning studies or planning bylaw reviews, but it was a change that we made after the strategic planning session, and we didn't have time to do that.
Rob?
Actually, I don't have any criticism, and I actually love the summer co-op student, and I'm glad you're doing that. And if possible, I would love to encourage engineering. That I don't know if it's at all possible, but I would love to look down the road in 2017, 2018 to see if we could increase our parks department over the summer by using the summer co-op student money, because it's just money that's sitting out there. And I would definitely be supportive if we ever wanted to move towards that direction. So.
Any further questions? No.
With respect, Madam Chair, I wonder if you might want to take a short break at this point, just to give staff just a couple minutes and everybody like a 5-minute break, because the next section is fairly complex, which is our asset purchases.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute, 10-minute break? 5-minute break. So we'll reconvene the meeting.
Okay, so we're going to carry on now in section 4. This is the sheets that were also handed out earlier. These are the big ticket items, capital asset purchases. And I see first up to bat is Mr. Tahoe, radios, vehicles, and attachments. I believe we're looking for Tahoe number 2.
So in 2017, Cresta will be finishing its upgrades, and we'll be looking at purchasing 3 new portable radios for the bylaw department. These pieces of equipment keep us in contact with the RCMP, Fire, and Public Works Department. And our current radios will be obsolete and will not work on the new system. And so we need to be purchasing 3 radios that year. In 2017, we're also looking at replacing vehicle 58. It is now into its 11th year. It has served us well, but it is getting long in the tooth, and it will need to be replaced. Along with that will have to be the emergency equipment and installation of that equipment on that vehicle. So that is the 3rd capital expenditure in 2017 for the bylaw department. If there's any questions, I can answer those.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just through you, because the Crest radio system will affect the fire department as well with new radios. So Crest does offer the option of carrying the costs for purchasing radios, and so we will do the capital purchase and then charge a fee or cover the borrowing costs for radios. Have we investigated that avenue as opposed to simply buying them outright?
The fire department and police department are slightly different than bylaw because we were not originally part of that agreement, so we actually had to purchase our radios at that time. They have expanded their purview, and they are now I don't have to do any, my maintenance and everything is now covered now, so I believe we might be eligible for that, but that is something I can look into and see if that will apply to us more for 2017, and I can get back to you with that answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Martin?
Thank you. I remember last council we purchased that second vehicle from Langford. So is this the vehicle that we're replacing?
Yes, 580 is the vehicle from Langford. Yes.
So really, it's less than 4 years old from our standpoint because we've had it less than 4 years.
It is still a 2002.
Which makes me wonder why we bought it in the first place.
The price of not purchasing a brand new vehicle and getting a vehicle at a significant cost savings that has given us 5 years of service.
Been here that long.
Any further questions?
Yes, about the 2016 expenditure. What was that for?
The Tahoe arrived late in December of 2015 and was put into the shop in January of this year to get all the emergency equipment installed, and due to it being in 2016, it has to be recorded in this year's budget. The money was from 2015, it was used in 2016.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Okay, so on protective services front, turn it over now to Chief Carrie Smith. Got a few items coming up there, Carrie.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The first one we have here is a training tower system, and that's scheduled for 2017. This has been bumped forward in years past because we just haven't been ready for it. And that price is probably high, and I haven't put a lot of work into it to fine-tune exactly what it is because it is not coming forward in this year's budget. And again, that may get bumped again. The equipment replacement, $49,000, is twofold. We were given a gator by two citizens in our community, and this is a used gator, and we have been able to also receive money from these citizens to make it very workable. The only thing it needs is an actual skid unit, and if you know what the gator is that you see at Wantafuca Parks and Recreation, it's 6 wheels and it's 4-wheel drive, and it has a box on the back of it. This box, they make special skid units that slide right into that box, supply you with water, hose, extinguishers, all the stuff that you would require to put out a small fire. This is for the beaches, Esquimalt Lagoon. This is for all our parks and trails where we physically cannot get a fire truck into them. And it's also an excellent unit because it has the mobility when we have special events down at, like we had at Rock the Shores. The 94 Commonwealth Games, we had to borrow a golf cart and fix it all up and put all our equipment on it for those games. So this is extremely, it's a very neat project, and the citizens have really helped us out, and that's just the missing link to make it functional. The rest is the cleanup and everything will be done with the mechanic. There's also been another citizen come forward, Gratis, who is very wise on the gators themselves, and he's willing to donate his time to help our mechanic. So that skid unit, I believe, if it's broken out there, $12,000. 10 on the board? Okay, $10,000. The other portion of that, this is something that it's an infrared camera system, and this is something that when we purchased the T-Rex aerial ladder, there were a number of things that we had to keep off the budget to ensure that this came in on budget, and there was no way that we were coming back to council and saying, well, guess what, it's over budget again. So there were things that when we sat down at the pre-construction meetings, we said, well, we can't have this because it's also something we can budget for in the near future and push that over a couple of years. It just happened to turn out at the end of this year that we were $160,000 short of spending the original budget. If we had have known that, we wouldn't be here talking about this again. And what it is an infrared camera system, so safety factor. You can see the hot spots in the buildings where to direct your streams. The incident commander can see it down below because the incident commander isn't up there, and can direct people on how they want the fire fought. And it gives them eyes in heavy smoke conditions also. The $65,000 is the replacement of the fire chief's vehicle in 2017. It's a 2001 Chevy, and so that's 15, so it'll be 16 years old. The other $65,000 in 2019 is for another inspection vehicle. And again, that's something that may come up 1 year early or go to 2020. I see I missed $20,000 there, and that's for a folding partition that when we did the renovations for the fire hall, we would be able to separate the association quarters and a large training area. And over the years, we just haven't found the real need to spend that kind of money to accomplish that, but we didn't want to lose sight of it, so we've kept moving it along so that we didn't lose it, that it's there. replace engine 5.1 and 5.7. Well, 5.7 has been replaced, so that's accomplished now. But what we did do this year, based on the condition of engine 5.1, is it was slated to be replaced in our fleet in 2017. And what we've done, to the smiles of the finance director, is move that to 2018.
And if I can just add why I was smiling is that we had originally planned on incurring more debt to pay for this, and I'm trying to avoid that. So by pushing it a year, we were able to add some more money into our fire fleet replacement reserve, and the plan now is to fund that from the reserve and not incur additional debt. So yes, thank you, I was smiling.
And the other paving gravel portion at the station, that's $20,000, and that $20,000 has been given to me in back-to-back years, and we've postponed it and moved it forward some more, and that's with Public Works doing all of that paving. Questions?
Okay, so if there's no questions on the fire section, I'm just going to speak briefly to the next item. I had a meeting with Jeff Amy, and we went over the emergency ops center budget. This item is for a small emergency program storage container. The total cost is $10,000. He thinks we may be able to get a grant of $5,000. And at this point, it is going to be going in on the Juan de Fuca Rec Center location, and it would be right adjacent to the senior center because that's where they would like to keep these items. So I think we had actually removed this from the previous year's budget, so we're bringing it forward for council's consideration this year. Go ahead, Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did Jeff say how he was going to fill it? Did he, I'm wondering if you required any additional funding so he could.
Good question. I don't.
Or maybe he can empty out his garage.
That did not come up in our discussion.
Any further questions?
Okay, so
just a quick question. Any idea where by the senior center? Because they don't have much in the way of flat spot that they're already occupying unless you use the parking lot.
I think it was around the back of it. Yeah, he did have a spot, and he had spoken to them about it, and the folks were on board.
To them.
It wasn't that big of a one.
Guys. Yeah.
Okay, so the next few items have IT beside them. I can actually probably speak to one or two per, or would you like to? Okay. So the first one, when we've raised money in the past for a couple of these projects, you'll see reserve for future expenditure of $6,500, and then you see another $60,000. So we have already raised the $6,500. The $60,000 though is a new ask, and there's a couple of really key issues here. When I started with you folks a couple of budgets ago now, we had in place the existing budget software that is producing this. It has its pros and it has its cons. It was designed very specifically by somebody who is a highly skilled IT person, and the Excel skills required are not the average skills that myself or my staff have, and it causes our system to crash quite frequently. It is that complicated, and we need something more generic so that anybody who comes in here is able to step up and use it, not a one-off system. Unfortunately, there's, like I say, things I like about it, and there's other things that it's just not working for us in terms of we've spent more time fighting with these budget workbooks to get this in front of you this evening than I could spend analyzing the content of this, because to me that's a key function of my job. And so we are looking at going to something that's much more standardized. Questica is put out by Great Plains. That's the financial software that we're using, and we're looking at going to something that is a recognized product throughout municipal government. And the other item that has already come up for mention this evening is this project activity module, which will allow us to better track our labor costs so that when Public Works is out working on projects, such as installing the fiber optic line or some of those other items, we're able to very accurately track those costs. Now, before we do any of the above, and we'll get to this when we address the finance workbook, is we need to completely overhaul our general ledger. Most of you don't care about this. All I will say is it's like our language, and our language is broken. So when we specify an account number, you'll see all kinds of account numbers on these documents, and you pick one of those numbers, say it's 5 digits, it should mean the same thing when used. It doesn't necessarily here. So when we go to pull a range of accounts and we say, give us all the employee benefits and we want to go from this number to that number, it doesn't work. It's not logical. So we have to fix that before we can actually move forward and implement new software. So that is a huge project, and we will be bringing forward a request to, we will need a little bit of additional in-house staff time because we have not had consistent staffing, and with several mat leaves as well recently, it has not allowed us to address some of these outstanding projects. So I had to give you a bit of background as to why you see these on here tonight, and if you have any questions, otherwise I will turn it over to you, Perd, on the other IT projects.
Are there any questions from committee?
I'll turn it on this time. So if I can talk briefly about the other 3 items on the list, the software city view. These are we've tried to group the projects, but so this group of projects deals with the development tracking, the asset management, and the GIS. So as we sort of work in those 3 areas to improve, that's what all this money over the next 3 years is for. So that's the 35, 35, and the 15. The one we call the software SharePoint. That's some upgrades that we need to do, some things that we need to track, like the hazardous material in the buildings, and that we need to keep better track of. And then there's also some video surveillance and a council. In 2018, we put some money in there to upgrade the audiovisual in the council chambers. So that's that one. The last one, the City Hall IT equipment upgrades. The $50,000 for this year is a new telephone system. So that's what that first item is. After that, we've got some website upgrades and what we call the citizen-facing and the public service information. So we want to do more in the communicating with the citizens. That's in 2017. And then we've allowed some money in there for better information to share with the public. So the developers and so on, we want to give them access to all their information and everything online. So that's things that we sort of put in there for 2017 and 2018. What I would like to highlight is that in those items, there is no new funds. I always like to say there's no new money. So it's basically, if we look at what we did not spend, what council has approved 2014 and 2015 that we did not spend last year, we've sort of kept that and we're recycling it into these projects. So, just, I'm sure everybody's love to hear that. That's no new money. But I think the priorities that we've set for what we're going to do on the projects for next 3 years, I think are reflecting council's priorities and also reflecting what's realistic and what staff can produce and put through as projects.
Cynthia?
Thanks. Just just wondering, how will you know that you've picked the right software this time? I mean, I know it's kind of a shot in the dark, or it has been for us. Obviously, with the problems that we've just described that, we have in the finance department, we obviously didn't pick the right software the last time. So how do we mitigate those issues going forward?
Well, there are no perfect software solutions, but what we're trying to do is to make sure that we get something that's generic, that's not so highly tailored and specific that people have never heard of it before, because this was one of the issues we have with the software that you have now that is used to produce your budgets and the financial statements. The financial statements aren't as problematic, but the budget software, which is all the same, it's using something called MS Query running in the background. It takes up so much horsepower per, I'm not sure how to describe this, it actually crashes the system. And when our managers go in, they all have access to these workbooks. But if they type outside the green areas that you see there, there's all kinds of formulas. And if they do that, just one cell, it will break the formulas and break all the links to all of the workbooks. This is why sometimes we look a little stressed at this time of the year, because it's way too, what's the word for that? It's not stable, and it's
what we have here is a spreadsheet, and the best thing I can say about it, spreadsheets are fantastic because you can go in there and you can change any number you want, and it'll redo all the recalculations for you. The bad part is nothing's ever locked down. So spreadsheets were not meant for multiple people to be going in there and playing with it. They're meant for one person to go in there and you know what you're doing and you're playing with the spreadsheet. When you start getting into spreadsheet for every project, for every department, I mean, this into several hundred spreadsheets, and they're all linked together. The spreadsheets were never designed for that, but they're doing it. So what's the better process is to buy a real program, a real application that is designed for that function. So when you think of Great Plains, that's what that is. It's actually an application that is written, and more importantly, you can track every transaction that you do, and you can also back it out if you don't like it. So with the spreadsheets that we have, there's no way, once you make a change, there's no way you can ever identify what you've done and go back, unless you can remember it, but there's no log after the fact. So this is a tool, and I'm not sure how you really, it's like taking an axe and going out there and cutting trees, but it's not the same as going out and planning it and having the right tool, like the right saw to go out and cut the trees and the ground.
So with the dedicated software that you would purchase, it would also have support if it wasn't operating appropriately, right?
Absolutely. And in the City View and the Great Plains, the packages we have already today, those actually are good, solid packages. You really don't hear us talking about, the City View is not working. What we're trying to do is add more modules to it. The Questica is part of the suite of modules. It does the budgeting within the Great Plains. So now we have the general ledger, and the Questica is the budgeting component to that.
And if I could just add, because that is such an excellent question you asked. I'm really glad you asked it, because the other thing is that we pay a licensing fee for these products, and along with that, we get a certain amount of service every year. Now, one of the problems we've had is we have this one-off product, but because we're no longer buying the services of the author full-time, because when I first came in, he wanted me to sign an agreement that he would continue to do all of our budget and all of our financial statements, and I said, we can't afford that. That's what staff should be doing. And you as a council were losing ownership of your budget and your financial statements. And so we were not getting the support, and that's a huge part of it. So that's why we're looking at going to something that is it's like an industry standard with support, with licenses, that anybody can come in with some financial background and use, and not something that's a one-off, because it puts the organization at risk.
So if I could just follow up, I'm just wondering how it might affect other areas in the City Hall, and whether or not there's a process to take that into consideration.
I'm not sure what your question is. Sorry.
If the software that you're choosing, does it affect other people besides finance, and are you taking that into account?
So if you look through the suite of software, yes, it does. Does impact the other departments. So what we've done this year, we've actually talked with the departments, identify where everybody needs to go and what they want to do, and that's how we arrive with the various development and the things that we want to do. So if you look at some of the packages involve City View, which is our property side, and we're adding modules to that as well. So if you look at the whole, if you look at 2015, the budget, we actually put some stuff in there for what we call the city portal. And what we actually were looking at a city portal for finance, city portal for the City View, and we're saying it's all citizen facing. So what we're doing is consolidating those needs and making sure that Sandra is involved, and we're actually moving forward in a path that pulls all the information from all the applications together. So we would, instead of having two different windows for the public, we're going to consolidate down into one. And then we're also, as we move forward with the asset management and development tracking, we're going to put that in there at the same time. So I think we're doing a much better job of consolidating the needs of all the departments. Yeah.
And if I can just add to that, we owe a large vote of thanks to Per, who was hired to do A, and it has morphed into 25 other things, including replacing our phone system. But he is also working on a document that will come forward to you, which is a strategic plan for our IT needs. And that will answer a lot of your questions, which is we're not doing this in isolation. We have a plan. We're working that plan to pull together the IT needs for all of our departments. You've seen snippets of it, whether it's the fiber optic cable, the new phone system, some of the software, but we're not doing it in isolation without any consultation with either council or the other departments. And I think that's a huge step forward here.
Any further questions? Rob?
Can I just get a clarification, just because it's a new way of doing it? Two questions. One, is all the software now going through Per versus going through the departments? So it's falling under that department now? Is that correct? Or how does that work?
We are trying to get Per to coordinate it, yes.
Okay. And so, for example, the City View. No, sorry, let's go SharePoint. SharePoint's planning, correct? SharePoint planning?
Well, Share planning uses SharePoint is a tool, sort of like a spreadsheet.
Oh, okay.
Lots of things. So yes, we're doing some things with SharePoint for planning department.
So whose budget will that fall under? Will that fall under planning's, or where will I see this in the next line item?
That's where we're trying to get most of this coordinated in an IT budget. It didn't used to be that way, and it was hard for you to track because there was things spread all over everyone's budget. So now we're trying to pull it together so you can see what are we spending on IT. And I must say this is one area where we really need to spend some money is on our IT infrastructure. We didn't really have a plan, and we didn't have a structure. So we've made good progress.
If I can add to that, we've prepared a 5-year plan on the IT, and that's after talking to the departments. So departments are still driving what function do they want to do. So what we're trying to do is pull into IT all the tools and software development hardware that we need for them to accomplish their stuff. But we're trying to bring it in more into IT. For this year, we left some of it back out in the department. So in other words, the telephone systems and so on, you will still find in the fire department and in administration. But I think when we come into 2017 and we've replaced the system, we will sort of try and consolidate it because it'll be easier for council to see all those costs in one location. And then there's also, you'll be able to follow the 5-year plan.
Question, and this is more, I guess, to Ian. I remember a couple years ago, one of the things was that when Jim Dodd left, we were looking at bringing in some sort of software or something to replace what he was doing from a drawing standpoint and all that. How does that fit into this sort of IT transition from an actual person to this?
If I recall correctly, we were discussing at that time more powerful mapping software that would be pushed out through City View into individual staff members' computers. That's part and parcel with what I've talked to Per about and what I expect will be part of the plan moving forward.
I was going to say this to make it right, Andrea. So what I'm hearing then is the budget money that Ian would have spent on that will show up in an IT budget eventually. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I just want to kind of wrap a little bow around this. I think the benefit of having Per here doing the strategic plan is it integrates all of these software programs that were being done in isolation within each department and creating potential incompatibilities or duplications or inability for other departments to utilize the power of the software that was purchased by another department. Once you integrate them, there's an opportunities like SharePoint, for instance, spans across all of the departments. CityView spans across many departments. If we get into other ones like Esri and all of these others, they span across departments, and if they're coordinated through one person, it's much easier to just address the needs of the departments instead of them looking at the products or the packaging, and they're just getting their needs addressed, and it's being done in a more corporate context.
Okay, so, Michael, I think you're back on deck for some very long list of things here. So I'll just remind everybody that we have tried to ensure that we've prioritized those projects that you've given us priorities on. Some of them are things that have not got done in previous years that were still back on the list. And a number of them toward the bottom there, some of the larger expensive items are new. So Michael is doing double or triple duty this evening because I know that when the budget was put together that your deputy Emmett did work on a lot of this, and he is not here this evening. Shar, who's running the computer here, we do have, you can see as we're going through, there is a number of documents to back these things up. We do have hyperlinks in there. So for a lot of these things, we do have pictures or we do have some other backup documents, okay? So Michael, the floor is yours.
So the first item on my list is emergency management auxiliary. It's labeled. That's a backup power source for City Hall. There is currently a backup, which is quite small and can only provide a limited amount of power, and is also Mike Skilling's informed me beyond its normal life. And so a couple of years ago, this item was first put in the budget. Council might want to think about the juxtaposition of the item on looking for the possibility of a new City Hall, and certainly in researching this item, we will be considering a portable power source. First of all, determining whether portable, suitable power source for the City Hall could be made portable, or whether it's too big to do that practically. We already employ one portable generator to deal with our pump stations when the power's out, and that can cover off several pump stations because we don't have high volumes right now at this stage of our development, and the generator is not used for very long in any one spot. However, pump stations are multiplying. We will be building another one shortly. The one in Central, that is the big budget, and we've also acquired a small one at Matilda, or Ilot rather. So there's good reason to have a second mobile power source anyway, and it might be an idea to combine it with this, but that would be the subject of our research if Council keeps this in the budget. Next item is replacing the current survey vehicle with a Chevy Express van. That's the smallest van I think we could find, and that would do the job. And we did investigate the possibility of electric vehicles for this, but there isn't a suitable electric vehicle on the market right now. The next item is trees for tomorrow, and that is a grant that we've been given. We've done 2 projects already with this, and they keep turning out cheaper than we had anticipated. And we're getting really good value for money, but we're going to do another project this year, plant more trees. If we don't spend the money, we have to give it back. The annual traffic calming improvement budget is a regular one, which would only just be starting this year unless you count the Sun Valley experiment, if you like, with these new not speed humps but speed pads, and that was quite successful in solving a neighborhood problem, and we have continual complaints from various neighborhoods. So it's put forward as a way to be able to deal with at least one of those per year, depending on the type of traffic calming that would be chosen in a particular case. The multi-use trail upgrades, that designation comes about because we tried to use this system in a way that it's not really intended to be used, and we ended up with a meaningless description. We won't be using that again. But that, the $435,000 in 2017 is meant to be our contribution to a project to build a bridge for the Galloping Goose over Souk Road, a bike bridge and pedestrian bridge. And the main reason for supposing that we would make a contribution to it is so that we have some control over the appearance of it, since it would be a major feature in Colwood's downtown. The Colwood Creek Park improvements. Oh, that's the water park, yes. There's been a lot of talk about building a water park somewhere. In the hyperlinks, we have some pictures of water parks full of happy people, and they're always really fit too. But anyway, that 58,000 would put one in Colwood Creek. Colwood Creek was chosen because it's a pretty popular park, and it's also pretty easy to get a very sunny location there, which would maximize use. And it also, we've identified that there is water service there that would keep the price down. Yep. Well, I would say that the cost of this is shown as coming from reserve for community amenities, but there is a good chance of getting a grant as a private company, and the name escapes me, that gives grants for these things. It's the co-op, yeah. And so it's the co-op gas station, yeah, great. And the grant would cover almost all of the cost. So that would definitely provide us with the ability to add a bathroom, yeah, without adding any money. But since it comes from a reserve, if we don't get the grant and we still want to add the bathroom, we can probably increase the take from the reserve. The CFO will shout if I say anything I shouldn't. Yeah.
That's all in, like that's power, that's getting water there, that's
yep.
Labor, everything.
Yep.
Okay.
Because because we
great.
have a location that
Yeah.
that would have those nearby.
You didn't touch on the 175,000 in 2018?
Yeah, that's because I wasn't able to identify that one at this time. These ones that didn't directly correlate, I was trying to identify this afternoon, and
So that wasn't the line item for a new Mercedes for each councillor, was it?
I just might be able to help you because when we were considering the Galloping Goose overpass, we also talked about lighting and upgrades further down from the overpass. So I think that might be what the 175,000 is related to.
that's right. That's right. Yes, thank you. I recall that now, because of the nature of the use, and that being a city center area.
I think there's upgrades. It's eluding me, but I think there was some upgrades to the Whale Road crossing, which are part of the plan. And then there's getting over Souk Road, and then there's crossing Belmont or somewhere in there. There's some more lighting issues.
Yeah, the Whale Road improvements are covered off, I believe, in the next one, signalized intersections. And I believe that's that 175,000. We have promised to do an improvement to that intersection. We found
So we found the multi-use trail upgrades. And the 175, can you see that, was Ocean Boulevard, Fort Rod Hill to Lagoon Bridge bike lanes.
Okay, I'm glad we found the right thing. So the upgrade to Wilfred Whale actually occurs off in 2019, and that would be the one you were talking about, Councillor Day. Now that I've got that unit up, I can see it's $450,000 split between sources. And the two 175,000s in signalized intersection are Painter and Machosen. That's driven by the development in Royal Bay, and the traffic there will be increasing from now on at a fairly steady pace, and Painter is difficult to get out of right now for short times, but that'll become much worse as Royal Bay develops. And the 110,000 in 2017 is Sukin-Machosen traffic signal and intersection.
Excuse me, can I just barge in and ask a question about the DCCs for that? Because we're talking something that's not too far off in the future, 2018, for the new signal at Painter and Machosen. Is that something that would not happen unless we get our DCC bylaw rewritten?
That is, as it's from DCCs, yes, unless we rewrite the bylaw to include these new projects, it won't be happening.
Michael, you mentioned the 110 was for Machosen and Souk, did you say?
Sukin-Machosen, yep.
So we're just replacing that, or is that intersection changing, or what are we doing with that? 'Cause
That's
there's lights
some-
there already.
That's some minor upgrades, I believe, to make the bicycle crossing better, and we have a picture of that there in the hyperlink. Yeah. So it's an improvement in getting bikes through that intersection.
So sorry, and I don't want to be stupid with this, but to me it looks as though all we've done is added a bike lane from Langholm Drive to Souk on both sides, and that's costing us $110,000. Jeez.
Yeah, I'm not sure of all the details on it. I don't believe there's a link there to an estimate, is there? No.
Does that sound reasonable? I don't know anything about construction.
I can probably get more detail on that for Wednesday.
Okay. And one final question too, just around intersections. How much does an intersection cost us to run?
If something like Painter Machosen, if that was four-legged, say, you'd be looking at $500,000 because there's no existing infrastructure there. There's just the road.
I just meant maintenance on a yearly basis,
Oh,
like just to
maintenance.
run it. So that, how much does an intersection cost us, like power and all that type of stuff? Is there a rough
The
number?
power is minimal. The maintenance these days, without having to change lights very often because they're LED, the maintenance comes up if you have a unit failure in the traffic controller. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Michael, I have a question. With respect to that intersection, is there any plans to extend that merge lane into its own lane, or is it going to just stay as a merge lane?
We know that we can improve the throughput on that intersection by actually reducing the incoming lanes from the west from 2 to 1, because further back it's only one lane, and that gets a fair amount of green, and then, as you say, having that merge lane become its own lane, it improves safety, it improves the speed of the merge, obviously, because they're not actually merging anymore, and it has very little impact on the capacity from the west.
We have one more question here for you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm assuming all of these items that you talked about relate back to the Transportation Master Plan implementation, right?
Yeah, and we're sort of running the priorities past the Transportation Public Infrastructure Committee, but that won't, because of the timing, it probably won't affect this budget at all. But it will, we'll be seeking confirmation that committee and then council agree with these future priorities formally in a more detailed way. So to some extent you could say these are, the exact year in which they occur could be regarded as a placeholder for now.
Right.
But these are the priorities as we see them emerging from the Transportation Master Plan, yes.
Yeah, I just asked because I'm thinking of certain areas like Latoria Road, where you have little sections that all they need to happen is to join them, to have a contiguous sidewalk along what is quite a dangerous stretch of road at the moment.
Sorry, which?
Latoria Road, between VMP and to Wishart.
Latoria is further down.
In the same plan?
Yeah, Latoria Wishart to VMP is 2018 under transportation upgrades at the bottom.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there we go.
My sheet's scribbled all over
I know,
with all
it's
this
a
information
tough one
that I
to-
dug out.
Okay. And so when will we have the opportunity to have that discussion, whether we want to bump something like that up or delay it?
Currently, we're scheduled to bring that to TMPI in March.
What I thought was tonight we could go through, this is your opportunity to have a good, fulsome discussion with the managers, the give and take, and then when it comes to actually moving things around and where we're going to find the money, I think we'll not get to that till the next meeting or maybe 2 meetings from now, because I have a feeling we may not get to the workbooks tonight. I think that might be the Wednesday night meeting. Exactly. Because some of the numbers that you're seeing here tonight, they're pretty big in the last couple years, and I was going to be going through where's the money coming from in terms of our deferred revenue and that sort of thing. So I thought tonight maybe you can ask questions and then you can make some notes, and then we'll bring that back to a future meeting, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, you do have that opportunity as part of this process, but then we're going to be going through this in more detail as part of the DCC bylaw anyway. For the future ones, there'd be opportunities later. So we're on Wilford Road Extension, and that's the Transportation Master Plan shows that has the opportunity to increase throughput on our on sort of Suit Road and Whale Road by diverting some of the traffic. If you connect Wilford Road through to View Royal, that depends. For that to happen, it depends on a number of things. There's some properties along there that have to develop and build the road connections, and then View Royal has to agree to it. So that's by no means a guarantee that can happen. But we like to do whatever we can to bring it nearer. The bus stops, this is money we spend to create bases for BC Transit to erect bus stops. And they now have a program of doing some every year. And Pattison are now out there under their new contract erecting bus shelters, and some of those existing transit ones they're replacing are being moved elsewhere. So we've got more than one thing going on here that's creating more and more bus shelters, which is good for transit use. The survey monuments, that's shown as taxes for now, but one of the reasons we haven't shown that starting till 2017 is because we'd like to create a room in the subdivision fees to add those monuments. They actually, they're a big help to developers. This is something I've done elsewhere, is that putting in more monuments and saving the developers' engineers a lot of time, as well as our own survey crew, results in, happy people on both sides. They're happy to pay the cost.
We have a question for you, Michael. Cynthia?
Sorry, just how many transit pads do you get for $16,000?
I think you get 4.
You get 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot depends on the situation. Whether they have to be raised, whether they're in an existing curbed area or not. Whether we have to divert a sidewalk around them, that sort of thing.
Okay. Just stay tuned. There's recommendations going to be coming forward from the Disabilities Committee for specific locations for accessible stops, which is the ones that need those pads the most, is the accessible stops. And so we're working on that, and we'll bring you a map with some suggested locations.
We definitely look forward to that. That'd be very useful. The VMP at Havenwood crosswalk, that includes the bridge over the little stream in Havenwood Park. It's essentially linking the trail system in Havenwood East to the trail system in Havenwood West. It includes refuges, to protect the pedestrians before they actually cross the lane from vehicles. They would be landscaped partly to make them stand out and make it obvious there's a crossing here. And then there has to be an overhead crossing sign because of the speed of the traffic and the fact that it's between intersections on a road that has very little other things to clue the drivers in that there might be people crossing there. It wouldn't be expected unless it was well advertised. And the power to that sign, which needs downcast lighting to illuminate the pedestrians, is being brought there by a developer's project, well, being brought very close. And that's what makes this possible in 2016. The Old Island Highway irrigation is shown way off in 2020 because it really depends on the outcome of sewage treatment before we know exactly what we're going to do with that. And I'm not meaning the decision won't be made till 2020. We just don't expect anything to be built, completed till then. The bicycle lanes on Machosen Road, that's tied in with the construction of the sewer for Central. So when the CRD Water did their water line replacement down the, what would that be, the east side of Machosen, we got a bike lane out of that reinstatement. And when we do the sewer on the west side, we'll get a bike lane out of that. And we'd like to have those both occur in the same year because of the synergies there. Wayfinding signage, a certain amount of wayfinding signage was created in 2015 and now just needs to be erected. I believe that 2015 was the year that we sort of decided what it would look like, or the city did, and so engineering will be erecting those as directed. Speed reader boards, you see one of the ones that's been erected in a very useful and I think perfectly chosen location at the top of the hill coming up out of the gravel pit, and it grabs attention, and it's not going to make everybody slow down, but you make enough cars slow down, the others are forced to, and it certainly has a visual impact, and you find yourself heading for the brake pedal, willing or not. Now, the next Machosen Road transportation upgrades, that is Machosen Road from Lagoon to Hatley, sidewalks and bike lanes, and Hatley to Cotlow, more minor improvements to improve safety. The Lagoon to Hatley basically is to deal with school children traveling to either of the two schools on there, Dunsmuir or Sangster. And that is doing the bits of sidewalk in between what development's doing.
So, Michael, if you just want to pause for a sec, we were just going to bring up, sometimes it's helpful for council to see the hyperlink here with the map, if you like. Gives you a bit of a visual.
So that red object on the screen on that map is where the entry is to Dunsmuir School grounds. Well, that's where the crosswalk will be. It'll be at that entry. I believe there's an entry at the other side as well. Rats are more intelligent. Well, I was going to comment on that when I got there, because it starts as a round number and then you calculate the grant percentage, and it winds up as two highly accurate numbers. You see David Stock's letter in the paper about the accuracy of the sewage treatment numbers? Oh, he was just scathing attack on people who are trying to predict to 1/10% the price of $1 billion project. I was just trying to check if that's the only hyperlink on that one. So that's showing you the entirety of the project, I believe. Can't really see it from this angle.
What is a zebra crosswalk?
A zebra crosswalk? Just the broad lines painted across. Yeah, we're what's that? Okay. Right. With permission, I'm moving on to the trail connection from Painted Road to Royal Bay School. And that's probably the most important step we can take to assist in safety of people getting to school at Royal Bay, because it takes them away from those high traffic roads. Even Wishart's a higher traffic road than Painter, obviously, and the more people we can get crossing that bit of the pit on a proper trail, the better off we are. We're almost at the end of the process of getting a stat right away from Royal Bay developer, as I understand it. Yeah, yeah. It's further than you would imagine. We have to, yeah. Well, and you have to do a switchback down the hill. And I believe there's a drainage ditch we have to get over too. I'm not sure about that one. And it includes coming up that little stub of a road. Well, essentially that intercepts Applegate, yeah. Not currently, no, because it doesn't actually improve the accessibility for any of the school kids, because they can walk down Dressler. Admittedly, then they're walking on a road that has a lot of parking on it. A low volume road compared to all the other alternatives. I think before we tackled Applegate, we'd have to do a public process with all of that neighborhood, since it's in their backyard, as far as they're concerned, anyway. Yeah, yeah. Peds and bikes. Yeah, yeah. We because of the switchback in it, we won't be able to get a fire truck down it even. Whether it could ever be made suitable for a fire truck, we'll find out as the development proceeds. That's something the approving officer could demand at that time when they get there. But that would be a decade away, be my guess. So the Machosen Wishart controller and PED signal, that's an ancient controller, museum piece I'd call it. It needs to be replaced anyway, but it's missing a PED movement on there, and we want to add that PED crossing movement, so crossing Wishart. And that controller can't take that additional phase anyway. So it's a good project to create a safer crossing of Wishart Road and upgrade a very old controller at the same time. The next one, which is interesting. Yeah, okay, the 927,844 plus the 275,000. Let me cover off the 60,000 and 2,060 first. That is improvements to Latoria at VMP, essentially, where pedestrians are kind of dumped at the corner as they come off the Red Barn development area, and left to wander across that busy intersection as best they can. So we're going to formalize that. There's a bit of blasting involved, some sidewalk and crosswalks. And there's a bit of land we need, but we don't anticipate any problem at all acquiring that, because it would be, we'd in fact be doing some work that a developer is going to have to do in the future anyway. So, and they're pretty logical people. I think they'll give up the land. But then in 2017, that includes a number of projects. The chosen road from Ben Homer to Cotlow. So that's essentially finishing off what was started the year before under the first transportation upgrades line. Plus Wishart from Chosen to Owens. These are sidewalks and or bike lanes. The bike lane's up in Carindale. And they're needed because most people find it difficult to bike up Carindale without wobbling a bit, and that's, you need the safety of a bike lane to do that. It also, yeah. 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 No, it's the two combined. The two bottommost one under the 2017 combined, and then split apart for, you know, for source, if you see what I mean. That's, so the numbers don't match. Totally foxed me early this afternoon until I figured that out. So I think I got to Latoria Boulevard, Wishart. Yeah, Latoria Road from Latoria Boulevard, where the new bike lanes end, to Wishart, adding bike lanes. The walking there would still be on the gravel shoulder, but we would make bike lanes. And as Councillor Martin pointed out, Painter East is part of that. That's actually the sort of the major project there. It's the east side of Painter. Sidewalks down that east side. Again, skipping the parts that development's going to do, which includes the Dunsmuir School upgrade. They're doing some sidewalks. Moving over to 2018 and looking at the bottom three lines all together, you've got Souk Road from sidewalk from where the sidewalk put in by West Shore ends to the View Royal border, and a sidewalk on the other side of the road from Well to Goldstream. There is sidewalk there right now, but it's really poor sidewalk, and we've had a lot of complaints from, for instance, people in mobility aids trying to manage that sidewalk. It has a number of difficulties for them. Thrifty side, yeah. Yeah, I gather the traffic between the, I think it's assisted housing further down and the Thrifties is, you know, that's a difficult trip for them to make. And it, sorry? That's 2018.
question on that. There's some undeveloped properties along there, and were they to develop, they would be required to put that sidewalk in, likely as a frontage dedication. So is this proposing that we abandon any hope of getting that contribution?
Well, it's always it's a toss-up, and in the end, you know, it's your decision. If you build it, they will come, as they say. That certainly happened in our neighbor's case, where millions of dollars were spent on sidewalk in the downtown, and then the development filled in. Would the development have happened anyway? Matter for speculation. So there's two ways of going at it. You know, leave out the undeveloped properties and leave a gap in your infrastructure on the assumption eventually they'll develop. Personally, I would say it's better in your downtown to complete it. That year also includes Machosen from Painter to Fairview. Which is a very short section. Yes, sorry, Farview. I live there and I still get them confused. Forecast for 2019. Again, looking at the bottom three lines, that includes Souk Road from Goldstream to Aldine. Bike lanes where there are none, sidewalks, and landscaping. And the final column is Machosen Road from Souk to Wishart. So the bike lanes will already be in on that section. This is sidewalks. And sorry? Yeah, 3 point something. 3.2 perhaps. And it was a very round number because it's a long way out. But of course, when you split it up for the grant, it turns into two highly exact numbers. But we haven't actually estimated it to that level.
Michael, I mean, right now we're scheduled to only spend $60,000 this year, and then next year, just looking at those two lines, you know, we're over $1 million, and then 2018 we're, you know, close to over $2 million. How realistic is that? Like, are we being realistic with those numbers? Like, I know that we've had problems getting things done just because there's so much work and everything else. Do you think these forecasts for 2017, 2018 are realistic from a standpoint of we could actually get the work done? Like, or is that just sort of placeholder that, yeah, we'd like to get this done, but we don't know if we could actually have time to do it?
You mean discounting the fact that I'll be retired and you'll lose your most productive person?
Oh, well, we'll definitely get it done then.
Ignoring that, it's actually, you know, I've been here 10 years, and in the beginning, in the first 5 years, I did very little other than try and solve the sewer problem. And then that switched over to sewage treatment, and we're still completing projects that are part of that sewer agreement, central sewers, but ILOT, Matilda. But those things are getting wiped off the books. We're also getting the master planning done. It's not rapid, but it's getting done. And with those things out of the way, it allows you to focus on projects much more clearly. And you know, this isn't, say, 2019. That's not really a lot more than the money we're going to spend this year. It's just that most of it's in the sewer fund.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, I do? Oh, yeah, I got over the page. Sorry. Premature jubilation. So, the electric Leaf, that's just a small car for, to replace one of the Foresters that is at the end of its useful life. And Mike Skillings has said these are by far the most economical cars to run for the 7 years that we run cars. I did suggest a Mitsubishi IMEV, but apparently the fleet pricing on electric Leafs is so good that it makes them a better bet than buying the cheaper car if it was you or I buying it. The equipment shed is Public Works has asked for that because they have small equipment now that has to sit outside, and they feel that its longevity would be improved and maintenance reduced if it just had a rain cover. So it won't be a completely enclosed shed, but it will be enough wall and roof to keep the rain off the equipment. The pickup truck is a replacement of an existing unit under our fleet renewal plan. We're just following the plan as outlined a while ago, and that includes the Freightliner as well. And the pedestrian crossings are replacement of units that are of a type that you can't get spares for anymore. So that's these amber flashing ones, and we've been replacing them in recent years since we ran into this problem with the one of the makes that we had used in the past, and they're all being moved over to the newer type now, different company. The Vector truck is shown in 2018, but I think next year we need to give some serious thought to whether that is replaced, whether it is rebuilt, or whether we go rental or lease. The Vector is used for a wide variety of tasks, but I want to sit down with Public Works and really study whether all of those tasks have to be done by a Vector. If we can limit its use to part of the year, then we make leasing a cheaper option than buying, perhaps. But we've got 2 years to figure out what's the best tack there, and I think next year it should be done to make sure that we get it right in the budget, and hopefully cheaper than $500,000. When the fleet reserve or fleet replacement plan was first put forward, there were always reservations about that number. The next line is the
Excuse me, Michael, we have one question with
Sorry,
respect to
just
that.
on the Vector truck issue, I'm just wondering if it, and because it may be looked at sooner, I thought I'd ask the question. Is it perhaps easier, and maybe it's an Andrea question, to do the accounting for what it's used for, if it's a lease or a rental, or I don't know if it makes any difference, but I know it's used for a lot of different jobs, some of them on the sewer system, some of them on water main or other, stormwater issues. I just don't know if there's a difference to how that would work.
Maybe Andrea could answer.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
Just if it makes any difference whether it's leased, rented, or owned in terms of how we apportion the cost out.
I think this speaks to our earlier discussion about some better software to track the different jobs that our staff are doing and that our equipment are doing. We're really hamstrung right now with the system that we have.
So Colwood Central Sewer Expansion, as mentioned, that's fulfilling one of our obligations. It's entirely at the cost of the LAS members. That money is going to be borrowed under long-term borrowing this year, but it will in fact be spent over 2016, 2017, my expectation. The Matilda and Ilot sewer is so we installed the pump at Ilot Place to solve the Ilot Place side of the equation, and this 30,000 is just some of the remaining work that was done in January. There was a temporary arrangement, and then that was made permanent. And then the 40,000 is for Matilda. We don't actually have control over when that gets spent. That is triggered by the subdivision of a property on Matilda Place. And as soon as that subdivision is proposed, we will need this money. So that will probably be moved in the budget until finally the trigger is pulled. And that will be our last commitment under that agreement. And finally, sewage treatment and resource. Currently, that is that's enough money to pretty well wind up what we've been doing to position ourselves to build our own sewage treatment plant. If we want to do more work than has already been done or will be done by the end of March, possibly in April, then there will be a report to council shortly, I believe, and council will have to start moving towards a decision on what our course is going to be, and that will determine perhaps what that budget is in the end. But since it's gas tax funding, it can be changed after the main budget's complete if that ends up being the course that we adopt. And right at the end there's the money for the waterproofing and possible protection of the pump station, or the first moves towards repositioning it. So I think I am done now.
Any questions? Jason?
Yes, on the 310 for the pump station protection, if I recall when that was before TPI, that was a two-phase project. Does this cover both phases?
That's right. Yes, thank you. The next phase is 2025, so it doesn't appear on here.
Okay, because I thought the 310,000 covered both phases.
No.
When that was originally presented.
It's kind of 250,000 for the protection, and then 400, I believe, 420. And we've got 50,000 in there, or 6. So it must be 260 and 420.
Okay.
We've got 50,000 in there for waterproofing the pump station.
It's something council should really be seriously considering, is whether to spend $300,000 or $500,000 on protecting a 15-year-old piece of infrastructure that's going to be flooded eventually anyway, or whether we should just bite the bullet and start looking for land now to put a new pump station on. They're not making any more land, so if a property went up for sale in that area, it might behoove us to consider having money available to purchase that property for future use. If sea level rise turns out the way it's predicted, and everything's pointing that way, then I would say by 2020, 2025, 2030, we are going to have serious problems with that pump station. We almost had it flooded out this year. It's only a matter of time before that not only I guess you can protect the pump station, but you can't protect the access to it. So unless you're going to build a big bridge that will protect our workers from flying logs and so forth in the storm season, just something we should be thinking about, whether we want to spend $500,000 to protect or start looking at replacement.
Just a quick question in terms of making that decision. This is in the budget for this year for a considerable amount of money. Will this be coming forward with a report for a decision? We're just putting the placeholder right now?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the minimum to solve the problem for now. But we have one last step of public consultation to do. To then come back to committee. It's possible that committee and council will decide on a further step in public consultation, depending on what results we get from what we've done so far, or council may make a decision. And we will lay out all the possible scenarios and what we expect their costs would be, including, you know, waterproofing the pump station and doing a very temporary upgrade to that berm structure, because you want to, you know, put off replacement of the pump station for a few years. But anyway, we'll detail that in a very comprehensive way.
Okay, not to get sidetracked, just I think we need to remember that there may be limitations to where the pump station can be located, and also the public has come to expect it is also an amenity. It's the washroom for the lagoon. So, and we're actually already have in our budget to put the water fountain in, et cetera, et cetera. So there's maybe a big picture that we need to consider when we talk about it. It's not just a pump station. It's also a public washroom and et
Well, if I
cetera.
could just address that. The intention wouldn't be to remove the building if we built another pump station. You can't move the building. It's impossible to move it. You can only move the equipment inside. So we would leave that there. If it floods, it doesn't matter. There's nothing in it that'll be damaged by water. And it would simply just not be available for use during bad weather of certain types. And the only thing that would really damage it is a tsunami, which would completely destroy it. And then we'd have to rebuild somewhere else.
Michael, what would you estimate a new pump would cost, new pump house?
The consultant said 2.5 million.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to mention that Michael and I have been having discussions about the temporary versus permanent, the temporary armoring versus permanent move. And I think there's still lots of discussions to have at minimum with the staff, at the staff level. But I think one of our concerns is temporarily armoring the pump station without knowing the impacts of the surrounding shoreline may accelerate the erosion of the surrounding beach. So these are the issues that kind of need to be addressed before we can say that we're doing a good thing by protecting the pump station when we may be accelerating the erosion of the beaches or even the Ocean Boulevard because of the deflection of the energy off to the side. So these are the kinds of things that we've got to kind of work out before we can actually bring something forward to council.
Any further questions? Thank you, Michael. So back to you, Andrea.
So I'm just going to ask council through the chair what your pleasure is. It is 9 o'clock. There's a couple things we could do. I'm just a little concerned. I can, for instance, go through some of your questions about where does the money come from? When should we be moving projects around? Or would you rather do that when you're fresh in a meeting, like I have brought with me this evening, the state of our reserves, so I can tell you where the money is and where the money is not, and when we're going to run out of money for some of these things? Or we can do that another time. The other thing we have on the agenda, and I wasn't sure if we would get to it, is the starting on the review of the workbook. So I think it's up to council what you would like to do.
What is council's desire or committee's desire? Did you want to defer this to the following meeting or carry on tonight?
Just a question, how full is the agenda already for Wednesday?
Well, it depends. I can't speak. You know, we have definitely allowed for much more discussion this year to go through the workbooks, because I think council and myself might have felt a bit rushed last year. So it's like there's lots of time this year. And these are big ticket items that we've been reviewing. When we get to the individual workbooks, the reason I gave you that budget summary earlier is because there isn't any really, there's a few staffing requests. I didn't see any really major items, you know, unless council, we're trying to not have you do a line by line of, you know, pens and pencils and that type of thing. So when we get to the workbooks, what you have in your binders this year is basically a one-page summary, right? So I'm hoping we can kind of go through that reasonably quickly. And if there's an exception where something is really different, by all means, we'll go into that. But I was hoping we could actually get through, if we don't start the workbooks this evening, that we could get through all of those on Wednesday night. We do have a short presentation at the beginning by the library, which is an $800,000 budget item, so we like to give them a little bit of time to review that with you.
Then I don't know how the rest of council feels, but I think if we have sufficient time that we could put it off to Wednesday. I know staff doesn't start late, they start early, and at 9 o'clock maybe we should give them a chance to go home, and if there's sufficient time that we all feel comfortable, resume on Wednesday with a fresh look.
Want to take a vote on that? All in favor for that? Oh, seconder? We don't need it? Okay. All those in favor then? Motion carried.
Wednesday at 5:30.
Next meeting's Wednesday at 5:30. And I would just like to thank the Finance Department for having the workbook available with all the hyperlinks. I found that very useful and very user-friendly for us to refer to for the ease of council's reference. Thank you.
Thank you, because we do try to strike a balance between how much paper do we give you versus how much is electronic. So thanks.
Yes. Motion to adjourn the meeting? All those in favor? Motion carried.